The courageous thing was to start my own business. I obviously could have tried to go to another consulting firm, but at that point in time, I was like, how can you be told you're being put up for partner one day and then let go the next day? I just thought that was just so incredulous that I couldn't trust another consulting firm.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Courageous Choice. I'm super honored today. We're welcoming in Edie Goldberg. She's the author of The Inside Gig. She's also the immediate past chair of the SHRM Foundation. She's an advisor. She's involved in venture tech as an investor and board member. She's a consultant, and she's got an exciting new book coming out early next year called Performance Enablement, which is a hot topic. We're all thinking about how we can drive performance in our organizations today. Welcome, Edie. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you so much for having me.
I was so inspired by our recent conversations just around the future of HR and how we're thinking about the future of work. And I would love for you to maybe share a little bit about what you've been working on and the things that you're thinking about, because it'll get us going on a great conversation today.
I would say a lot of what I'm passionate about is really the intersection of talent management and the future of work. So we have all these practices that we've been engaged in for forever. And lo and behold, the world of work has changed a lot. And it really requires us to change our practices. And we haven't been doing that. We've just been sticking with the tried and true. We know those are best practices, but we need to disrupt a lot of things that we do, from recruiting, which AI is really having a huge impact on. And so, yes, I'm one of those people who's really excited about AI. I think the possibilities are more positive than negative. I know right now there's a lot of chatter about jobs going away and new jobs will be created. That's my answer. And better work. We'll be doing like more interesting work because all the easy stuff that kind of grinded us down will get done by AI. When we think about how we've managed talent in organizations from the start with my first book, The Inside Gig, AI actually was the technology that really helped us think about how we help people manage their careers in a completely different way. And I remember I was working for a large global company and I was helping them to develop a career management philosophy and practices and how they were going to encourage career development within their organization. And I remember talking to somebody and they said, unless my manager dies, there's no place for me to go. And I thought, you're in this huge global organization. Like the only place for you to move or go up is, in your current job with your current manager. I just thought it was insane. It's because we can't see. We can't
Yes.
see beyond our own work team. But technology today really allows us to connect based on the skills that we have, our interests, our passions, to other opportunities within the organization. And so that's what gets me super excited. So now we have to disrupt, career management within organizations and use new tools that help us operate in new ways. That's what my book, Performance Enablement, is really about, taking what we know from the science and the research, because I'm an industrial organizational psychologist by training. So research is my first love. But really, there's a lot of stuff that we do in performance management that's backed by research and really important, and we should keep doing that. And there's a lot of stuff that we've learned that doesn't really hold water. We aren't rational human beings. And so we don't necessarily, behavioral economics has changed how we think of some of the ways in which we manage talent. So we need new paradigms about how we go about enabling people to be successful. And that's really what the book is about. But it leans into what I think is general ethos that I see in many different conversations, whether it's in the AI world or something else, this more humanistic approach, a more positive approach. It's not a drag you down, judge you, make you feel bad approach to performance management. It's the reason why everyone hates performance management. But I want to create a process that's uplifting, that helps us grow and be the best professionals that we can be. And that's what my new book is really about.
That is so exciting. That intersection and opportunity in the disruption and in the pace of change and the preferences of the workforce, how those are shifting, and this opportunity that you're talking about around tapping into people's inspiration and helping. The truth is that most organizations are going to look totally different in 12, 18, 24 months than they do today. I know we're helping a lot of organizations with like org design and really rethinking things. And you can't design for where you are now, you're designing for where you're going, which really incorporates that work, thinking about how AI is going to change roles, thinking about how you can really invent opportunities for people to lean into their strengths. I find it such an exciting time to be in our profession, and I'm really looking forward to reading what some of the research that you're doing around how that's changing and how organizations can navigate that, because it's one thing like conceptually to understand, but actually moving from here to there can be a big lift, especially if you're a large organization. Are you starting to help companies do that work now?
I've been doing this for many years because of what started with the inside gig. You have to just really think about how do we disrupt the processes that we have? That's the talent strategy consultant. I wear a lot of hats, but that is my regular full-time gig. And I love helping companies think about how do we attract, engage, retain, develop, motivate our employees. And it's not necessarily letting those old practices get in the way of how we make greater success for the future.
So I can imagine there's like mindset shifts, both for leaders, certainly for HR professionals and teams, but also for our employees. I talk a lot about, like you said, don't limit yourself by what you can see today, boxes on an org chart or waiting for your manager to pass away or whatever, right? There's so many ways this could go. And it's almost like creating that opportunity for all parties to find those new paths that not only lead to individual success, but organizational success.
I often say to people, you got to grab this opportunity right and left, and new things are coming about all the time. AI is really helping to develop like new opportunities and capabilities within companies. And so employees should be looking for those, if you will, white spaces where there's an opportunity to do something different and jump in. Nobody's career, people think the career is some straight line. It used to be that career ladder, right? That career ladder broke many years ago. We started taking rungs out of it. And, you really started having to go right and left in order to be able to ultimately go up because jobs were getting broader, et cetera. But the new job that you might be looking for doesn't even exist today. And so when it does come about, you got to go for that. So I think it is about thinking about opportunities and not holding yourself to it's just this one thing because something else might interest you more.
And that we may not even know of yet. I recently had the opportunity to see you on a panel talking about AI, and it was an audience of HR leaders. And so, if you were talking to HR leaders about the courage to maybe initiate some of this change or to really lean into either AI and or reshaping both roles and structures and performance management in their organizations, what advice do you have, or how would you maybe recommend they start?
We have to think differently and we have to think about now with the new technologies that we have, what are the possibilities that exist? And I want to share this because I know you have a company called Gig Talent. And I gave a presentation a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, a couple of weeks ago, to a recruiting audience. And recruiters have traditionally, they recruit for people who don't work for the company. So bringing new people in and recruiting them for full-time roles. And that's the model. That's what recruiters do. They hire full-time employees. People work very differently today. Technology affords us a lot of opportunities to work differently. I can't tell you the number of people I have talked to in the last X number of months who perhaps have gotten either laid off from their company or they just decided to take a career pivot. Some sort of change happened within their organization. They decided it was a good time to exit. And, everybody's thinking about what their options are. And a lot of their options are, I'm going to become a fractional CMO or CHRO, or I'm going to just do project-based work. A lot of the best talent out there decided they want to work on their own terms. Like we learned through the pandemic, working remotely, that you could do this and everything. A lot of work changed during the pandemic time. So people all of a sudden were shifted to new projects and people realized I could work on a project. Like this would be really great. So there are all these people who are entering the gig world oh boy, if I can remember my statistics, there's something like this is an exact correct statistic, but I'm going to get the magnitude right. There are like 73.4 million people today who operate as a freelance or consultant like myself. But by 2030, that's expected to be 90.1 million people. It is a very large part of the labor market. And so I was talking to these recruiters and I said, if your model is only I'm bringing people who don't work for my company, and so the inside gig is really about looking at your internal talent and who has the skills to help out on a project. But we have to look at our own internal talent, but we also need to think about letting people operate in different ways. And how do we hire people with the right skills, the capabilities, the experiences that we need to execute on a really critical business priority project, et cetera. And a lot of times those people aren't going to be your employees. They're going to work on some sort of gig platform or they're a contractor like myself. People work in many different ways. And so we need more flexible talent models to be able to capture. And particularly as skill sets are change, I could talk about this forever. Okay. As skill sets are changing, it's really hard sometimes to find people with the skills that we need.
Right.
And so you have to look in unusual places. And maybe it's that somebody just got a digital certification in some hot new technical skill that you need in your company. And now that they have this certification, they just want to work on a project basis. So they're either freelancing on their own or they're going through one of these gig platforms. So the people that I was talking to, they were really shocked at this. Wow, we have to think about that differently. We have to access talent differently. So I think it's just the ripe opportunity in many different practices that we have that the old practices might not be the best way.
It's so interesting. And you and I, we always joke because we both could talk about this all day, but it's so true. The talent is choosing to work differently. And I was talking to a CHRO recently. She had a need for like a BP for about 6 months. And she's like, why would somebody good want to do that as a fractional person? And so we had this really great conversation about people leaning into the things that they love to do, that they're really good at, their specific skill sets. And that even people who are in the gig economy, they also love to be part of a team. And the idea of getting to have that feeling for 6 months, something that's consistent could be really great and lean into their strengths. It was an interesting conversation, that idea that you said, where some of the experts, some of the really top talent are choosing to work that way, is a new concept for some folks to understand. And the flip side, I think a lot about for organizations, what's the implication then when you're thinking about what's your value proposition to be an employee? I think there are some really great ones, but we have to be helping our organizations continue to shift that, because employees now, or people, the workforce has choice, and they're more and more aware of that choice. And you want to retain the best and the brightest for your organization. And so thinking about not only talent management, of course, but culture, how we integrate teams of internal and external talent. I mean, there's so many implications, right? We could just keep going. Right?
Yeah, there was a really great example a couple of years ago. I believe it was Intel developed what they call the freelance economy or something like within their own business. So these were actually Intel employees who didn't want to work full time. And I did a case study on them. This was a number of years ago. But what they found was some people, like one woman I talked to, she was very involved in Paralympics. So she really wanted to work full time, except for she wanted these 3 months off that she could be involved with the Paralympics. So she wanted to make that work-life balance thing work for her in her own way. We know many women have childcare responsibilities, or in these days, we might have parent care responsibilities too. So caregiving has become a huge issue for organizations. And so a lot of people literally cannot work full time because of these other responsibilities that are being put on them, whether it's male or a female, but they want to contribute. They don't want to completely check out, but they've got to be able to work on their own terms because they have these other personal commitments that are also very important to them. And I know people at times who have had to literally check out of the workplace because they had to take care of a loved one or a child who was having some problems. We just need to find new ways to help them do what they want to do and still not lose access to the brilliance of people to help them be their best whole selves.
I love that conversation because, like, I can remember being junior in my career. I was working with Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts, and I was pregnant, and my grandmother, who I was very close to, had passed away, and I didn't have any vacation left. And I went to my boss and I said, I have to go. And I was like devastated because I was obviously a very committed employee. I couldn't not go to my grandma. My boss said to me, just go. We've got it. Go. Not only did they cover me, but they paid me. I was making not very much, but it didn't matter. They paid me. Talk about building loyalty, right? And allowing for moments in life. And if we expect employees or we want employees to join us and stay with us for long periods of time, we have time. We have to be able to adapt to how life happens. And I think what you're talking about is so important because it's true. And if you just look at the demographics of population in general, we are having more people dealing with caregiving, and we also have more people dealing with mental health challenges, and that often is affecting our kids. So if we can find ways to flex and challenge assumptions that might be showing up for us as leaders, I think it's really important because I've heard too many times like, oh, if you want some kind of adjustment, maybe they're assuming you're lazy or, like you said, you're checking out or you're just not committed. And that is definitely, I would say, not the norm. People are super committed. They want to have a purposeful career that's a significant part of their life. They just have these other responsibilities or interests that they're passionate about or committed to. And there's only like a finite amount of time in the day. So they're trying to kind of find a way to make it work. And I think it's a cool opportunity for the companies that can navigate that well, I think are going to be talent magnets.
Let's also talk about the changing demographics that we have, right? Western countries are having fewer and fewer babies. So our population is decreasing. We haven't been reproducing at replacement rates for a number of years, decades now. So that's starting to really impact our organizations. And yet, baby boomers are retiring at very huge rates. But if you're living a 100-year life, a lot of people don't want to retire at 65 or whatever they're doing. So they want to work, but they want to work on their own terms because they really want to golf on Tuesdays and Thursdays or whatever their passion and hobby is. And innovative companies like Unilever started with the concepts around the inside gig and implementing an internal talent marketplace that allows you to tap into the talent that you have within the organization and let them work on projects of their own choosing. And now they start to expand that concept and say, we can let people that we know have been successful employees over a period of time, we can let them design their own work so that they can work on their own terms. So maybe they have a secure number of hours and benefits that they get. But beyond that, it's all project-based work and they only get paid if they work those gigs. Companies are starting to come up with these more creative ways of saying, you person with so much knowledge knows how our company works. There is some really great research that shows that highly tenured employees, we won't call them old, we'll call them highly tenured, add disproportionate value within your organization because of all the relationships that they have and how they know how to navigate in the organization. And if we can hold on to that talent for a little longer by letting them work more flexibly, and it's not just a Lord knows nobody works a 9 to 5 job and 40 hours a week anymore, but it's not necessarily that construct. And we can still gain access to that really great talent by letting them work more flexibly. So it is a huge win-win for organizations. But again, we have to think about how do we work differently.
That's really interesting. I hadn't even really made that connection yet around the potential of using the network, the way things get done. Like when you think about like organizational network analysis or whatever, even without doing analysis, who some of those connectors are and leveraging them in a way. I think a lot of companies that I talk to are trying to deal with whether it's hybrid and flexible workplace and belonging and how do we collaborate and really create those connections and relationships. And so I hadn't really thought about that as maybe an intentional way to leverage some of those natural connectors in organizations to bring others into the fold, to create that as part of their responsibilities or the design of how we work. There's some interesting opportunity there that you just got me thinking about.
Research by some really wonderful economists that I know really showed that it's essentially tenure really has an increase in productivity because of I know how to get things done. I know who to go to. I can influence that other team. That institutional knowledge and those relationships that we've built over time have a great deal of value. And we have to think about ways to hold on to that value in a way that works for both parties.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that becomes exponentially valuable given the fact that so many other variables are changing, right? So that being able to be nimble or agile in the how, because you know who to go to and how to network through systems and things like that, regardless of the other changing variables, like is going to help speed and the work itself. That's really fascinating when you start thinking about it because people are a little bit flippant around maybe how loyal companies are to employees. And that's part of how the construct's changing, that kind of feeling that potentially what used to feel secure maybe doesn't feel as secure in today's world. So it's something for organizations to think about around there is this value that we might not be fully aware of, and as we're looking at things, we don't want to undervalue that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's interesting. So, I mean, just looking at your practice, one of the cool things that you and I both get is this lens into multiple organizations and kind of what they're doing. Is there anything that you've seen recently that, is really inspiring or innovative that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Inspiring and innovative. I do know we are oddly still having this hybrid debate conversation. And I was just speaking with somebody the other day, an organization that I'd helped them through their hybrid strategy and what they were going to do. And I was sharing that I had just in a oddly informal way run into somebody who worked for the company and they said, "Thank you so much. Because of the strategies that we've employed at my company, it's enabled me to stay. And I have some health issues and I wouldn't have been able to go into the office every day. And I love my company and I love my work. And so I'm just so grateful we got to this place. But they're still thinking, like, is this working? So I've seen some companies do it really well and really understand that it's about connection and how do we help people build the relationships that they need? Going back to that conversation that we were just having about how people add value within organizations, we need to help them to build those relationships that help people be more successful within organizations. I am struggling a little here, Jamie, with that question of we've heard some great success stories about AI, about how companies are using AI. It really does require rethinking roles and what kind of work people are doing. So I love the fact that you said that you're doing some job design work because it's really work design. How do we want to do this differently? And how are we going to put together maybe what was one set of roles has now morphed into a variety of different things? And I think the companies that are really kind of leaning into that, we've seen some examples from Moderna that had been really well reputed.
I don't know if you saw that. There was a clip, I think it may have been their CHRO and CTO who was talking about how she basically built profiles of her executive team in AI, leveraging assessments and data that obviously in a proprietary version, but then was able to use it to either predict how people would respond in conversations, understand why there was conflict, understand how to rectify it, maybe predict the right way to approach someone if you're trying to influence a decision. Like it's fascinating to see the way that people are thinking about that. And I think your point is well taken. I almost think that it's, yes, we're helping redesign roles, but it's almost about building that mechanism for ongoing adaptation because it's going to continue to shift as we come up with new ways to leverage AI or to change roles. And so we know that one of the biggest skills that people are hiring for is like adaptability and being agile and flexible and all those things. And so that's when I think about the early workforce, how do we build those skills? How do universities and even high schools really be teaching like this is a critical need, even if it's not innate personal style, because the pace of change is just so big, right? And then how do we lean into those strengths for people who maybe are more process driven? There's still places for that. It's how do we adjust processes and be able to explain why and walk people through those levels of change in an organization. It's just such an exciting time.
I have a personal mantra, which is always be learning, which is really important today, right? Curiosity is really important. And the willingness to learn and to dive into something new. The people who are curious and who are willing to try and learn new things, those are the people who are thriving today. So if you ask, what are the skills? How do we build that into people? I think particularly college does teach these kind of curiosity, ask questions, and learning be very important. I think that kind of problem solving and learning approaches that we learn is probably the most valuable thing that we get out of a college education, regardless of what discipline that you're in. But you don't have to go to college necessarily to develop those skills. And I think that's when people get stuck. I'm a X and that's all I am. Then it
Yeah.
becomes who moved my cheese because that job maybe doesn't look like that anymore because some of the tasks have gone to AI. So people really need to be flexible in what they do and how they add value.
And redefining, like you said, from a job or a title or the box on a chart or whatever, and really thinking about that value and role you play on the team. I think it's just a redefinition, almost at an identity level of what does that bucket of work look like for each of us?
Now, I get some people who debate this with me a lot, and I certainly debate this with myself a lot, but I've done a lot of research in career management, and there's a lot of discussion that younger employees, they expect promotions to happen really, really quickly, and it's all about job title. I have to be a director, whatever. And so when I've done a lot of interviews and focus groups with younger folks, and is it really the title that you're at? Is that really what's important? And ultimately, they come back and say, it's learning and growing that's important to them. They don't want to be stagnant. That's what we have to focus on in business is helping people to learn and grow. And sometimes a job title comes with that, but this is the part of the opportunities way over here. It's not up that ladder. If we're constantly learning and growing, we can access more opportunities.
And sometimes it's those internal constructs. Oh, if you're a director and above, you get to go to these meetings. So you get access to the information, you get exposure to things. So it's an artificial, like, I need the title so that I have access. And so sometimes reassessing that, because I think in order for people to even contribute their best and really feel part of that build, we do want more information. The people who are absorbing and learning and trying to adapt, like, I always say I can do better at my piece when I understand the whole pie or I can see part of the whole pie, right? And so, how can we feel that for people and not make them feel excluded, but not necessarily just by attainment of a title?
And this is no burn on lawyers. My father was a lawyer his entire career. I have huge respect for lawyers and what they do. But I know a lot of recovering lawyers in HR. So people
Yeah.
who followed a law career and then ultimately ended up in HR, employment law. I mean, it's all very, very similar. But it's this idea of just because I have this degree in this field doesn't mean that's what I have to do. I can leverage that in a different discipline that takes value from what I had before. So we do see a lot of people today pivoting to new careers. Very different. I mean, lawyer to HR is not a big shift if you are an employment lawyer, but a lot of people are really, really pivoting today. And we saw that actually really start to pick up during the pandemic when people who were in the perhaps hospitality industry realized I need a more secure job. And they went and got some education and then pursued whether it be nursing or something in technology, where they got skilled in some of the newer technologies that we're having a hard time finding people with those skills. So lots of opportunities. You can pivot. You just have to be willing to learn.
That is an exciting place to be. And when you have that foundation of customer service, it's hard to go wrong because that's about connection as well. Want to thank you so much for joining us today. If you think about just one word of advice for leaders who want to have impact or are leading through change, what's maybe one piece of advice you'd leave us with?
I'm going to say think differently. Realize that our world of work has changed, that employee expectations have changed, that the things that we can do because we have new technology that brings us new capability, everything's changed. Not everything, but a lot of things have changed. And it's time to look at it with a new lens. Bring somebody in, maybe from a different discipline, a different background than you, who can look at that differently. One of the things that the Inside Gig, my first book, really brings to companies is when you have a problem to solve and you bring in people from different disciplines, we actually can create more innovation around how to solve that because we all look at it with our different lenses. So bring in people who have different backgrounds, appreciate the fact that they do look at the problem differently. And that will actually only help us improve innovation, get to more innovative ideas. So that would be my piece of advice.
So, Edie, I didn't ask you this question yet, but I really want to know about your personal stories of courage. Everybody on this journey, as we look back, there's different points that really stand out to us. And I'm hoping that you might be willing to share your own kind of points that stand out to you where courage showed up in your professional life or personal life.
So this is pretty relevant because so many people are getting laid off right now, right? And it's hard. It's your professional reputation. It feels terrible. This is now almost 24 years ago. So clearly a success story. But I was a senior consultant at Towers Perrin, and they'd just done a huge strategy study. And they had decided that they were going to get rid of their human capital practice because nobody knew them for that. And I was the global thought leader in career management, learning and development, succession planning. I was a West region leader in performance management. And I was thinking, I knew this was coming, but I had great relationships in the company. I had a lot of skills. And I thought they won't let me go. And I was told one day by a partner that I was being put up for partner. And I thought, well, okay, this is. And then the next day I was told they had to let me go because I was the global leader of everything they were getting rid of. And I was shocked also because they were starting up a measurement practice and I had 8 semesters of advanced statistical training. And so I thought, even if they were going to get rid of my practice, they wouldn't just move. They wanted me to be a partner. They were just going to move me to this other practice, but they didn't do that.
Wow.
And I was kind of surprised. But my husband had his own management consulting firm for a number of years. And I had always wanted to do that, but I was too scared. How would I start? What would I do? And this situation forced me to start my own business
Wow.
and never looked back. I used to sit there and say, it's great. I can now spend my time working with customers, clients, rather than talking about sales. Because I would sit in all these meetings and we would just talk about how to get more sales as opposed to like being out there and getting more sales. And there were all this administrative stuff that I hated being with a big firm. And now I got to work on my own terms because of their decision to get out of these areas. They actually let me tell my clients that I was going out on my own. So I took several of my clients with me, which was fine with them because they didn't want them to go to a competitor. They later regretted that decision, but that was on them, not me. So the courageous thing was to start my own business. I obviously could have tried to go to another consulting firm, but at that point in time, I was like, how can you be told you're being put up for partner one day and then let go the next day? I just thought that was just so incredulous that I couldn't trust another consulting firm.
Yeah, it must have felt like a punch in the gut, like shocking.
Everybody feels that way right now, right? Everybody who's going through this, regardless of how talented you are, it feels personal. And it's generally not personal.
To you, to us, it is when it happens.
Yeah,
But
but it was the greatest swift kick in the rear that I ever got. And I've had a wonderful, successful career since then. 24 years, I've had my own practice and I've been happy and living my best life and doing great work with amazing clients and collaborating with amazing other associates. Yale Goldberg and Associates really has associates. They are not just my cats. So it's been a great success story, But I know so many people are going through that today that it was my story of courage was to take that and force myself to start my own business because I'd always wanted to do it, was too afraid, and didn't really have an excuse until I got laid off.
Thank you for sharing that. Sometimes that nudge that we need, we talk about how sometimes it's a quiet nudge and sometimes it's really loud, but you had the courage to step through it and look what you've created and shared with all of us. Thank you so much, Edie. That's awesome. If you haven't read Edie's book, The Inside Gig, I highly recommend it. We're all going to be waiting with anticipation for the next one. It sounds super timely. Thank you so much, Edie, for joining us. And thanks for everyone for listening. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to The Courageous Choice. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review to help get the word out about the podcast. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our future conversations. If you'd like to know more about gig talent, please visit gigtalentagency.com or email us at podcast@gigtalentagency.com. See you in the next episode.